This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, gang? Welcome to another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Andrew Paterson, Michael Remis with you. We got a busy one tonight. We've got to get to a couple of awesome playoff games last night that went the distance and then some last night in the National Hockey League. Double OT between the Canes and Rangers. Overtime with the Stars and Avalanche. And then the other big part of NHL business last night, the Sharks winning the lottery. And hey, it's never too early to talk a little draft. And Chris Peters from Flow Hockey, fresh off of the U18 championship in Helsinki, Finland, is going to jump on with us. We'll talk a little bit about the significance of the Sharks winning the lottery. How big of a win is this for them, with the opportunity to select Macklin Celebrini at number 1 overall, overall strength of the draft, as well as get into what he's hearing on a few Winnipeg Jet prospects that have already been drafted, like Elias Salmonsson in the season that he just had in the Swedish League, winning a championship. So Peters is going to jump on with us. The big story down on the south side of the city is the beginning of Blue Bomber rookie camp, including a certain 54-year-old legend wearing number 85 out on the field today. That's right, the Turtle Man, Milt Stiegel's back in the peg, was back on the field today with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Darrin Bauming is down at Princess Auto Stadium and is going to join us a little later on to talk both about Milt being on and what the rest of the rookie class of 2024 showed out today in the first day of official team activities in advance of Blue Bomber training camp coming up on Sunday. But of course, as we move forward into the offseason, the number one story hockey-wise here in the Peg is the next head coach of the Winnipeg Jets. Murat of The Athletic has a great piece at theathletic.com on potential head coaches, the search, Scott Arniel, as well as other individuals that might put their name forward. We're going to get to all that with Murat coming up first up at the bottom of the hour. So should be a great show. Great to have you all with us. And just before we bring in Michael Remis, shout out to everybody listening on the podcast. Thanks for making us a part of your day. Welcome to everybody on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And a huge thanks to the sponsors that make WST happen each and every day. The folks at Princess Auto, Coolbet Canada, Rolly's Transfer, Consolidated Supply, Canadian Club, Little Brown Jug, Modern Man Barbershop and Manitoba Battery, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports, Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, Wallace & Wallace, F Apparel, Next Door at 116 Sherbrooke, big wing night tonight, the Winnipeg Gold Eyes, Assiniboia Downs, Breezy Bend Country Club, and of course, we will also get to a why not question of the day for Not Autocorp over at Waverly and McGillivray. But before we do any of that, we welcome in Michael Remis. Remo, what's up? How are you?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. You know, the first round, I don't know if it had like the intrigue that you normally have, but this second round, off to a great start in the playoffs. 2 overtime games, great teams, so that was awesome. And oh yeah, we had the draft lottery, and I know a number of people out there when it went down to San Jose, Chicago, just hoping that Chicago didn't get number 1, and we got Sharks won, so we were very, very pleased. But yeah, I'm doing good here. Weather's nice. The Jets are out, but we got head coach watch day 2, Bombers, and then a lot of Sea Bears news as we march toward their start of the season. Their training camp starts next week, so there is a lot going on here in Winnipeg Sports Talk, Huss.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, just quickly on the Sea Bears, and we'll talk more Sea Bears as we get closer to their opener. But I had a couple drinks with Jason Smith, who's the GM and sort of runs the operation. It was just talking about how excited they are to get going with the season. But announced today, the home opener on the 24th is sold out, which is amazing. I think that, moving forward, they will. I already know they've had a huge, huge increase in season tickets this year. But it'd be a good time to maybe, and probably holding a few season tickets back. So if you're still thinking about maybe getting on board with the Seabears and don't want to miss out on the home opener, I'd suggest maybe giving them a call and seeing if there's anything left, if you can get in on seasons. Otherwise, make a point of getting to some of the other games. And as we've seen, good idea to get your tickets early because Seabears basketball has been a huge, huge hit. And they did tease, and I do expect today or tomorrow, one more big signing. I know Joey Slattery had mentioned that this is a player with NBA experience, which should be exciting for the fans here. And again, just building off an amazing first season for the Seabears, the excitement level's growing for that home opener on May 24th. There's the tweet from Slats. Seabears will be signing an American on Thursday, so that's tomorrow, with significant NBA experience, including as a starter. And just speaks to the growth of this league and the reputation that Winnipeg has built in a very, very short time. But Remo, let's get to these games last night. Like before we kind of dive into everything going on with the with the Jets, and Murat's going to join us in just a few minutes. What an unbelievable night of playoff hockey. You sort of mentioned that the first round was a little anticlimactic, certainly here in Winnipeg. We did get a couple game sevens, which was fun on the weekend. But holy smokes, have these series started off great. I mean, that Carolina Ranger game last night was a classic. It had it all. Great goals, unbelievable goaltending. Shesterkin was on one last night. A few bizarre plays, including one courtesy of former Winnipeg Jet Jacob Trouba. But the bottom line is they went the distance and then some, double overtime, and Vincent Trocheck sent the fans at MSG into pandemonium in the second OT, getting a big win. And the Rangers did what they set out to do, hold serve at home, taking advantage of home ice. And they're up 2-0 right now on a very good Carolina team that probably feels like they left one there last night.
Yeah, tough Carolina taking the penalty there after, you're not able to convert yet again on a power play. Shesterkin been elite for the Rangers. And yeah, Carolina takes a penalty. Mark Messier was not happy on the broadcast about that call. I know. I think you tweeted you weren't.
It was a bogus call. That's a really tough way for the game to end.
I thought it was a penalty. I mean, I don't know. He took two hands and shoved the guy. I didn't think you could do that. Like, play defense. You can't.
You can shove a guy with the puck, no problem. I mean, they called it cross-checking. I don't know about that.
Wasn't that cross-check when you go like this? I thought it was a cross-check. I mean,
barely. I thought.
I'll agree.
But listen, Carolina, they only have themselves to blame, or Ilya Shesterkin, because they were 0 for 5 on the power play. And maybe the most incredible sequence in the entire game was at the end of the third period, where the Rangers were on the power play for the final 90 seconds of regulation, and Carolina had a couple of glorious chances shorthanded, including Winnipeg's Seth Jarvis on a beautiful feat from Stahl going in all alone, stopped by Shesterkin, and then just probably 20-25 seconds later, another Kane in all alone, stymied by Shesterkin. Just a hell of a game. And my God, this would be such an amazing time to be in New York City because they're going back and forth from the pandemonium of the Knicks and their playoff run to the Rangers. I believe the Knicks will be back going on. I mean, MSG hasn't had playoff fever like this in a long time for both of the tenants of the world's most famous arena.
Yeah, and we talked yesterday on the show with Mike how special teams is such a factor in the playoffs, and you saw, the teams that were doing pretty good, and the special teams advanced. Last night, Carolina 0 for 5 on the power play, and the Rangers 2 for 7. So special teams, the difference in their 4-3 win, and Igor Shesterkin second among playoff goalies and goals saved above expected behind Jeremy Swayman. And Carolina, I mean, they've been close so many years. I thought they're going to get over the hump this year. Just a very solid team, very well coached. They're too good. They're too good every year. So Brindamore can't get any Jack Adams nominations because you have to go from bad to good. You want to get a Jack Adams and can't just be straight good. But for Brindamore, I mean, his contract's up. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. You wonder if it's his last hurrah with Carolina, but that's a tough one. And again, you get 57 shots on goal. What a performance by Shesterkin. I gotta say, I love the Rangers goal song. Like when they celebrated and you hear them all chanting along. It was awesome. So I picked Carolina to win the series, but I guess it's good for hockey, right? If you want the HRR to go up, you want the Rangers to win.
Well, listen, I still think this is going to be a long series. I don't. They say you're not really screwed until you lose at home. Carolina's going to have to take care of business on home ice and get this thing to a best of 3. And Carolina's done that for the last number of years. I mean, they're great in the first 2 rounds, and then they historically get swept in the third round. That certainly is not part of the plan, but they're going to be up against it to make it through. And we were talking about the odds beforehand, and it was a little strange that Carolina was such a significant favorite against a team that won the President's Trophy and had home ice. And listen, the Rangers are proving it. And you have a goaltender play like that in such a tightly contested series. That can be the difference. And I think Shesterkin certainly was the difference last night. Before we get to Colorado-Dallas, we have to talk about this play with Jacob Trouba. Like, I'm not even sure if reckless does it justice, what happened last night. If you missed it, Jacob Trouba took a big-time Trouba-esque run at Marty Necas. Necas got out of the way. Trouba launched himself at the player, missed, whipped out his elbow, chicken wing style, barely missing Necas's head, and then, as I tweeted last night, went full rhino into the boards, head first, and that was only part of it, then came down, and his skate hit Necas in the head. There was a whole bunch of things that were avoided there. Amazing that Necas got out of it without any sort of... there's the photo of where Trouba is right now, going headfirst into the boards. Very lucky that no one was hurt on the play. And I would suggest Remo Trouba is incredibly lucky that his elbow didn't hit the head, because if it did, and it barely missed, that would have been guaranteed phone call from NHL player safety and missing some significant time in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I remember Jacob Trouba here. He'd always go for the big hit, and he would miss often. And in the last couple of years, he's kind of figured out how to time it to actually take guys' heads off.
Has he?
Well, I mean, he didn't. He kind of went, I want to say fell out of his skates yesterday, just going headfirst into the boards, trying to lay out Marty Necas, but he missed. And, I mean, I don't know if you can suspend him for that, because there technically wasn't a hit, but there's got to be some kind of phone call made here. Like, it's just such a ridiculous play, jumping, diving at a guy, launching yourself like a missile. Like, you can't do that. And I just think the rules they're silly if you can't, but I don't know. He didn't actually do anything. Here's some of the pictures. Look at this picture from Bruce Bennett, Getty Images. Like,
Unreal.
This is a wild, wild image. Snow flying everywhere, head first into the boards. What a visual. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but this could have been very, very bad. So I guess a guy, has to get seriously injured for them to consider a suspension on dangerous intent.
Yeah, like, I mean, I tweeted that out last night, and I had a lot of people saying, and it's your boy Bruce saying, ridiculous play, so dangerous in so many ways. True, but I mean, if you don't make contact with the guy, I don't know how you level any sort of discipline. To your point, though, I think a phone call to the Rangers telling number 8 to take a chill pill with some of these crazy hits and just, cool it a little bit and use it is probably going to happen. Kevin Kowalik with an absolute beauty in here. Shout out to Roman Reigns. Trouba just skipped the Superman punch and went straight to the flying spear. Although in WWE style, Nick has just managed to dodge it. And then Royster Trouba launching himself like Super Dave at Nick Cash. And waiters say, should he be suspended for almost hitting a guy? No, but don't think that play wasn't already on the radar. And I think Trouba does need to hold it together a little bit moving forward if he plans to stay in this series and help his team move on to the third round. We talked about special teams, Reem, when you sort of, laid it out. I mean, with the teams that were successful in special teams in the first round, all moving on, the ones that were on the wrong end, making tea times. We saw special teams play a huge part in the late game last night between the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars. My take on this one was the Stars, really started off well, kind of pulling in all of that energy they had from that incredible comeback in Game 7 win, comeback in the series in the Game 7 win against the Vegas Golden Knights. And they were up 3-0 after one. It looked like Game 1 Georgiev was back in effect, letting in 3 in the first in the first period, and it was sort of all Dallas. And God knows we know about the lethal nature of the Colorado power play. They got a power play. They scored within about 15 seconds or less, and then it was game on. And at that point, I think the wear and tear of the first series really kicked in for Dallas, and Colorado took advantage of their rested nature in relentlessly coming back into that game. And then, of course, winning in overtime on a Miles Wood beauty. There was some deja vu, I'm sure, for Jets fans watching that last night. But Colorado, once again, led by their stars, McKinnon, Makar, coming back from a 3-0 deficit and stealing Game 1 on the road. Just a huge win for Colorado.
Yeah, that whole broadcast just felt like they were throwing salt in the wound on Jets fans, just mentioning over and over again, repeatedly, how dominant they were in round 1 series against Winnipeg. And you mentioned special teams. Again, the difference in that game, Colorado goes 2 for 2 and Dallas goes 1 for 4. And I thought Dallas had a number of chances to end it in overtime, but Georgiev, he was rattled to start, but, figured it out as the game went on. And you mentioned Dallas coming out hot, outshooting Colorado 9-5, but the Avs, after their days off in the mountains, finally found their footing, outshooting Dallas 11-3 in the second and 6-4. So not a ton of shots on goal. Colorado managing 26. I think they routinely got like 36 in the round 1 series. But, talk about goalies and save percentage. I enjoyed this tweet after the game from Murat, who's coming up with you, Huss. He says, Jake Ottinger with an 8.46 save percentage against Colorado tonight. I guess he must not be very good either. And I think it is possible, Huss, Colorado could be fulfilling the prophecy that we've seen the last couple seasons when the Jets get eliminated. They get eliminated by a Stanley Cup finalist, 2018, Vegas, 2019, St. Louis, 2021, Montreal, 2023, Vegas. And could it be continued here in 2024? Colorado. They look excellent, and we'll see if it can continue. They're going to be tough to beat, man. And I got to say, a Miles Wood on that goal. AJ Malesko said this on broadcast. 28. I thought that was 29 going down the wing. Man, I've seen him here. He's got speed, but he burned Heiskanen. He wasn't close. So what a move. It looked exactly like McKinnon. It was crazy.
Well, and listen, we went into this series thinking that the depth of the Jets in the first round of series, of course, I'm speaking of, that the depth of the Jets were going to be, was going to be maybe a big difference in that series. Colorado has the top end talent. Do they have the rest of the players? Well, we're finding out that they do. And Wood was a significant factor right from Game 1 throughout the series in the first round, and doing it again right now. And yes, you're exactly right. That was I mean, that was just a big time goal. Their depth players have really raised their level of play. Their stars are playing at an incredible level, and that's why it really was no match. And I have to admit, it was, I don't want to say a little bit depressing, but maybe that is the right word. Just watching those two teams play, and the level that we saw from Colorado and now with Dallas, thinking about how close the Jets were, well, right in between those two teams and in a race with them all season long, just how far off the Jets playoff game was compared to what we're seeing from those other teams. And I think that's a big part of the, what do we call it? The soul searching, the review, the meetings that the Jets are having right now, in that how far off they were from playing a winning brand of hockey in the playoffs after everything that they'd done at the regular season. Because, I mean, if you've been watching these games, obviously we saw what Colorado did to Winnipeg in the first round. It seems like there's a lot of other teams that are playing right there at or with the Avalanche level. And it is really disappointing that we didn't see the best of the Jets to, at least give their best going up against a team like Colorado in what ended up being a quick series.
Yeah, it is kind of wild to think, looking back at the Jets season. I mean, they finished second in the West. I mean, they were right up there, firmly a playoff team, and just seemed so far away from the Avalanche in that first round series. Like it almost like leaves you wondering, like, was this season a success or not? You think it would be. They set, number of franchise records, win streaks, points, road wins. I mean, all around, it was such a, your coach was nominated for the Jack Adams Vezina Trophy nominated goalie. But in the playoffs, they just could not keep up at all with Colorado and, just got dominated. So I think you're very confused, like, just the regular season. I think if you're following the Jets, or I don't know how the organization feels about, the playoff performance. Well, probably not what they wanted, but you had such a great season, but none of it was applicable at all in the playoffs, and you got run out of the building. It's very strange, and I'm curious how we're going to look back on this series for the Jets, in the years to come, and maybe even at the end, if Colorado ends up winning the cup or gets to the cup, maybe you don't feel as bad, because like they're going to have to go even if Colorado gets to the cup final or wins, like the teams you have to beat. The Jets, who are second, Dallas, let's say Edmonton wins, they're pretty good too. And whoever's in the East, who's that going to be? Rangers, Florida. I mean, they're good teams. So, they just look very good and have elite players.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think even if Colorado makes it all the way and wins the cup, I think there's still going to be a ton of regret. Just that,
Yes.
We didn't see anything close to the Jets' best game. And, it literally looked like a mismatch. I mean, you would have never thought that these teams, were so close. Or, in fact, Winnipeg actually finished ahead of Colorado in the regular season. And, I mean, that 7-0 win at the end of the year seems like, some sort of fantasy right now. But all you can do is make the most of the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned, and move forward and hopefully be better. And a big part of that is going to be on the shoulders of the next head coach of the Winnipeg Jets. And we're going to get into that with Murat coming up in just a couple of minutes. Tonight, we do have game 2 between Boston and the Florida Panthers in Florida. Boston with that big 5-1 win in game number 1 of that series to snatch home ice away from the Panthers. And then we finally get the beginning of the Edmonton-Vancouver series. And as I talked with Dusty today on the Lock Shop, Reem, they just need to get this one started. There's been enough nonsense with Oiler fans and Canuck fans online. I think everyone's just ready to drop the damn puck and get this one going.
Yeah, it's been way too long, and there was an event tonight in Dallas, and they want to have them on separate days, so Edmonton, Vancouver had to wait, and yeah, 2 Canadian teams. I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. Will Connor McDavid be able to get over the hump and, get further, towards the Western Conference, or can Vancouver shock everyone? Because I don't think anyone's picking Vancouver. I don't know how many people bought their regular season after finishing first. Goaltending questions for sure for them, but I think Edmonton has some questions as well. But they're gonna have to try to slow down the power play, which was some ridiculous number against the Kings. So
it's like 55%.
Yeah,
I think it was legitimately 45%, and their PK was 100.
Yeah, so that's going to be tough. I think Vancouver, they've got all talented players. So, and if you do want to, if we're keeping track of former Jets in the playoffs, I guess you got Evander Kane with Edmonton and Tyler Myers there on Vancouver to go with the Trouba, Roslovic, Wheeler trio on the Rangers. So there's some former Jets, and then Paul Maurice, of course, Jamie Koppa and Kevin Stenlund in Florida. So there's some
Stenny.
Man, Stenny's he's been an impact guy for them, Stenny.
It was interesting that, he got sort of cut loose by the Jets. Florida jumped on him, and he's played such a consistent role for that team in the bottom six all season long. All right, we got Murat coming up in just a couple of minutes right now. Let me shout out our friends at Rolly's Transfer. And gang, if this summer brings a move for you and your family, I can imagine you're probably stressed out. You know how much work goes into it, but you're also wanting to make sure that it goes as smoothly as possible, and you get the best price on everything that you need. That is where our friends at Rolly's Transfer come in. Family owned and operated for over 60 years here in Manitoba. Rolly's Transfer, in addition with their logistics business, which brings them all over southern Manitoba, means that they've got the best flexibility, most routes, and can do it at the best price as well. If you are planning a move, use our friendly the friendly folks over at Rolly's to help you with it. The most trusted name in moving for over 60 years, and the best way to find out is to go to their website. Beautiful revamped website. All the information about their services, their history is there. And they've also got a great request a quote feature right up at the top right corner of the screen. Simply just fill that out. You'll have a quick turnaround, and one of our friends from Rolly's will give you a holler and let you know the cost of it and set up your move to take as much of the stress out of that move as possible. Again, Rollys.com, ROLLYS.com is where you're going to find that request a quote feature. And Rolly's Transfer, Manitoba's trusted name in moving services for over 60 years. It is absolutely gorgeous outside right now. It is going to be that way for the majority of the week. And now it's time for you to get working on all of those projects. And I imagine many of you probably doing a number of things with the lawn on the property for either your home or your business. And that's where our friends at Consolidated Supply come in, the number one leaders in irrigation supplies and products right now, and irrigation solutions for your spot, not to mention artificial turf, golf carts, and other great options for your property, including hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchens. And of course, they're also the leaders in small engine parts and repair. It's getting busy at Consolidated Supply. Pop by and see them at their showroom, open to the public, 1395 Niagara Road East. And you can find out more online at cte.ca. Well, for those golf carts and boats and everything you're going to be working on this or enjoying this summer, you got to make sure you're powered up. And that is why Manitoba Batteries are there right now with a big spring sale to give you the best prices on all your battery needs heading into spring and summer. Listen, when it comes to batteries for literally anything, Manitoba Battery consistently has the best prices in town, beating the pants off the big box stores, and you'll be able to shop local as well. And even better, Manitoba Battery will deliver it to you for free anywhere inside the perimeter of Winnipeg with any purchase over $60. It is just that easy. So get on over to manitobabattery.com. Check out all the great deals on right now for the spring sale. And of course, you can see them as well. Logan Avenue, the original spot, and now their new location on Dover Court on the south end. And it's all there waiting for you at manitobabattery.com as well. And hey, fellas, if you need to freshen up the look heading into spring, get on down to one of 8 Modern Man barber shops and get on that. Modern Man, 8 conveniently locations throughout the city of Winnipeg, including the newest spots on Plessis Road and on Pembina Highway right near Bishop, featuring great haircuts, beard shaping, shaves, color services, and more, and all the products to keep you looking good after your cut. Easiest way to make an appointment is to book your look at modernmanbarber.com. And of course, you can give them a follow on Instagram as well at Modern Man Barbershops. All right. Well, you know what, Reem? We're going to listen, but while we wait for Murat to come on, and I know Milt Stegall would probably not accept this, but I am going to give a cheers, a Canadian club cheers to the man, Milt Stegall. Canadian club is perfect for celebrating big moments, special achievements, and greatness. And Milt definitely is that guy. Of course, we'll be enjoying Canadian Club all year long at Princess Auto Stadium, as CC is the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And, we'll CC and Ginger out there, maybe a few CCs in and around the Rum Hut. And, of course, some great Blue Bomber football and CC right behind the Bombers all the way. In the meantime, whether you're toasting Milt Stegall or just making a cocktail after work, the great taste of Canada's #1 Canadian whiskey is Canadian Club, and it's available at your local Manitoba liquor marts. How about Milt getting back out there today, Reem?
Yeah, shout out to Ed Tate and Darrin putting out some great videos, and it's day one of rookie camp, and here he is, 54 years old, Milt Stegall, wearing number 85. He said he was wearing shoes from I think 2004-ish. They still work. He's got the with that crown on the helmet. There he's running drills, Huss. Looks good, man. You wouldn't know that there's a 50-year-old man under those pads. There's no way. Look at him.
You wouldn't at all. You wouldn't at all. Listen, he's still got it. He has famously kept himself in immaculate condition. And what was the saying that Ed mentioned to us? Two things you can always count on. I'll be pretty in the face and thin in the waist. He's certainly exactly that. But Bauming is there. I'm sure we're talking to Milt as well today. We'll maybe hear some of that later on. But Darrin's going to join us in the second hour of the show from Princess Auto Stadium to fill us in on Milt pulling the full Rodney Dangerfield and going back to school today at rookie camp for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. But let's welcome in Murat of The Athletic. We'll talk draft with Chris Peters a little later on. We will get to the football. But, of course, been a big week for the Winnipeg Jets. The retirement from coaching for Rick Bowness and moving forward to select an incredibly big decision for the organization, the next head coach. Murat joins us well. Murat, great to see and talk to you as always. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm getting a kick out of this sunshine. And it took me a few days. Maybe I'm still processing. It took me a few days to get used to the rhythm of not going to a rink all the time. Now I'm very in off-season mode. I got a lot of off-season thoughts for you.
Well, I can't wait to get to all of those. The off-season took a bit of a turn. There's certainly some clarity a couple days ago when we got the word that Rick Bowness was retiring from coaching. Did that catch you off guard? I mean, were you surprised at all? I was sort of going back and forth from what we heard from Rick at the end of the year. I mean, after Game 5, it didn't really sound like a guy that was ready to walk away. But, I mean, he mentioned that an hour after the game, he told his coaches that was it. Well, what was your take on just how it went down? And did it catch you off guard at all?
I don't think so. I think I remember being here a week ago and saying, hey, don't read too much into the way that he's talking about problem solving, the future. He's still wearing the coach's cap. There's no way to get out of it. If you're in front of that podium, the experience is there. You talk about where the team needs to go. I got wind that he wasn't sitting in on the players' exit interviews. So there's, the exit interviews they typically have with players and coaches and management and all of that, kind of in concert with the exit day media availabilities they do with us. And so he wasn't sitting in on those. I think that was a pretty good indication as well. Pardon me?
Who was?
As far as I have it, just players and management, but I don't know exactly which aspects of management. I don't think, if I remember correctly, Cheveldayoff told us Zinger wasn't around quite yet. So maybe that was Cheveldayoff and Simmons, or maybe that was just Cheveldayoff and perhaps Chipman was involved as well. I'm not 100% sure.
I was actually more wondering for the rest of the coaching staff, like if Scott Arniel was in on that. That might be a bit of a tell if if Arnie did all of those at the end of the season without Bones.
You know what I'm imagining, though I don't know this, as a matter of fact, and that's a good follow-up to the fact that Bones wasn't there, is like which members of staff were. My assumption, and let's use that word clearly so that I could be wrong here, was that it was players and management. And that my guess is if I'm right about that, then some of the questions would have been, well, what did you see from the coaching staff? How did you feel when Scott Arniel took over? What do you think the team needs? Like those types of honest conversations. And I'm under the impression that Scott Arniel was a popular coach amongst Jets players. I think that the overall feeling with him behind the bench was a positive. I thought that they have communicated a sense that he was calm, he was a little organized. There are moments that maybe Bonus would lose a line matchup or what have you. Arniel was a little bit sharper on that. So I think the overall vibe from the players would be that Arniel is somebody they'd be comfortable with.
Well, and again, this cannot be a shock or a surprise. I mean, Rick Bowness, yes, is up for the Jack Adams Trophy, but we knew that when he signed on, this wasn't, going to be a 5 or 6 or 7 year thing. They basically pulled him out of retirement a couple of years ago to take over the job. And with some of the personal things that he had health-wise, obviously what was going on with his wife Judy last year, there was some significant time away from the club during these 2 years. And despite how well the season went during the regular season, we knew that this was definitely a possibility. So moving on, you wrote about this in The Athletic. This is a big, big decision for the Winnipeg Jets, and you certainly have a very legitimate candidate in Scott Arniel. But as you wrote, Murat, the organization really does, I think, owe it to themselves and all stakeholders to do everything they can to make sure they're making the right choice. And that will involve a number of other candidates, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, Scott Arniel was hired with the thought, I think, of a succession plan in mind. The fact that he is a candidate for the head coaching job does not surprise me. It shouldn't shock anybody. It shouldn't be seen as unreasonable either. I think he did the job that was asked of him. Certainly, he'll have some PK questions to answer as well. This year, it struggled quite a lot. But I think that he fulfilled the role that was asked of him, and that associate coach title, there's a lot of thought that there was a bit of succession plan built into this. There's also a sense, though, and remember, we're less than a week removed from exit interviews where Winnipeg's players and staff, and that includes Bonus and that includes Kevin Cheveldayoff, we're all talking about ways that the organization needs to get better. Okay, they understand they've come a long way. They've developed a better sense of team cohesion, an identity that involves better defensive play during the regular season. We all saw Colorado. There are a lot of progressive steps made, but there are a lot of steps yet to make for the Winnipeg Jets if they're going to get to that level. So you can't stand there, to me, like this is my opinion, you can't stand there one day and say, we're going to, turn over every rock, and we're going to make sure that we're going to do everything we can to make sure everybody in this organization is 5 to 10% better next year, and then just give the job to Scott Arniel without a proper, thorough search. I think that would leave a lot on the table. I'm also convinced that when Winnipeg went searching for a coach 2 years ago, and we remember Barry Trott's watch for sure. I talked to Jim Montgomery at that time. Yeah, they had some talks, and Rick Tocchet and John Tortorella was consulted as well. The Winnipeg Jets learned an awful lot about themselves during that time. And my perception of it is that this type of honest consultation from outside voices, respected outside voices saying, hey, this is what we see. This is what we prepare for against you. This is what we think that you can get better at and what your strengths are. If Winnipeg is going to go from there to here, acknowledge the fact that it's grown, acknowledge the fact that it still has room to grow, and then not having that exact same type of round of consultations, conversations, interviews even, I think it would be leaving an awful lot on the table. And then I wouldn't buy it at face value that they are in fact trying to get 5 to 10% better.
I love the fact that you mentioned all of those conversations 2 years ago and what they learned about themselves from the outside looking in. I also wonder, and again, listen, you did a great job of laying it out, and there's no doubt about it. Rick Bowness accomplished a lot. I mean, changed the culture, put together 2 really quality regular seasons, including 52 wins and 110 points. And I mean, a season that, exceeded everybody's expectations this past year. I do wonder, though, under sober reflection for a few days after the playoffs, how much getting ragdolled by the Colorado Avalanche, what they learned about the team there in that spot, and how that might be resonating within management right now, especially watching the Stars and Avalanche go at it last night and the Rangers and Hurricanes, and seeing a style of play that we saw nothing like from the Winnipeg Jets through 5 games of the postseason.
Well, the tough lesson learned comes from, at least on paper, they threw their best punch and it didn't do a dent, right? Like, we can talk about the way that they played on the ice, the way that Colorado played. And I got lots of time for that. I think the Avalanche played a masterful game against the Winnipeg Jets, and that's part of the lesson to be learned. But one of the key things is that Mark Scheifele wasn't hurt. Josh Morrissey wasn't hurt. There wasn't a whole bunch of stars on the sidelines watching Winnipeg's final game. Nikolai Ehlers was in the lineup. All of those things worked in Winnipeg's favor. They had went out and got Sean Monahan and Tyler Toffoli. Everything that they wanted, they sized themselves up and they said, this is what we want to be. They put those pieces out on the ice. They said, these are the pieces we wanted based on the transactions that they made, and they got smoked. There is no side reason. There is no excuse. There is just, I think, a cold, hard realization that Winnipeg did not get to its game. Colorado did. And the difference was not a small one. It was a gulf. It was canyon-esque. And that, I think, is going to sit with the organization. I think that's why, my goodness, I am so pleased with Josh Morrissey's postseason remarks and the way that I believe that he's taken the idea of needing to get better to heart. And if everybody follows that lead, or if he's part of a group that all feels that way, great. That's going to have some long-term ramifications. I think the reason it's so stark is because, like I say, I think Winnipeg threw its best attempt at a punch and it did no damage at all.
I mean, they certainly did try to, and I guess on paper they had their best punch, but I mean, I don't think they got anywhere close to playing their best game. I mean, we saw much better of them through the regular season. I still am having a tough time saying, were the Jets just that off and didn't get anywhere close to their game? Or are the Colorado Avalanche just simply in another class come playoff time where they raised their level of play from top to bottom of their lineup, and the Jets couldn't answer? Yeah,
moving off of paper and onto the ice, I think that's the humbling difference. I think when you have Colorado's second and third line players outplaying Winnipeg's top players, you've got a problem. And it's not an on-paper problem. It's not an offensive ability problem. It's a getting to the front of the net problem, a two-way commitment problem, a never cheat even one shift, one moment problem. And it's also a gameplay issue. I think that the way that Colorado backed Winnipeg off with its speed, and Winnipeg had no answer, shows a pretty big divide in what Colorado was able to do execution-wise, and Winnipeg's inability to, I don't know, I want to say adapt, maybe lay more picks, maybe get a little bit more aggressive in terms of taking away that speed. It also exposed Winnipeg's defense as a group that largely wasn't mobile enough to hold that blue line against Colorado's speed. It also exposed Winnipeg's forwards because when Colorado gained the offensive line, Nathan McKinnon pulled up, found Cale Makar. Okay, great. They all knew that was coming, but that's executed at a speed you can't match. Well, what happened next? It wasn't always Cale Makar wires a shot top corner. It was Cale Makar finds a seam across a whole group of disorganized defenders to Arturi Lehkonen or Valeri Nichushkin, and there were goals being scored that the goaltender had no chance on. That's a team-wide execution issue. That's a team-wide preparedness issue. There was an amount to which Winnipeg was outclassed in execution that I think suggests a little bit more about Colorado's ability to ramp up its effort and compete and all of those sorts of things. It also speaks to maybe some sobering realizations of Winnipeg's best players at their best still give up a little bit. So they've got to make up the difference elsewhere, whether that's coaching, whether that's strategy, whether that's pure effort. ideally goaltending, but that wasn't enough. They need to make up for it elsewhere. And I think that enormous gap, I mean, they were just outclassed, and part of the sobering realization right now.
Well, and listen, I mean, Bones is moving on to retirement, and I mean, you know, they're moving in a new direction one way or the other with the coaching staff. But I do wonder, I mean, you tweeted that out, and I appreciated that piece from the Denver Post from, I believe it was Corey Masiak, on, you know, the Avalanche's use of analytics in particular in this series. The more, like, I read that article and thought more about the games and what we saw and the fact that the Jets didn't have an answer. And I started to wonder how big of a part of the Avalanche 5-game win and the way they won was not just the talent that Colorado's putting out, but a game plan that might have been on another level than Winnipeg's, and the inability for Winnipeg to figure that out and change things.
Yeah, I think that there's I hold a lot of stock in that. Let's put it that way. Some of the things that we need to make abundantly clear if we're talking about analytics and their impact on a series like this is that analytics is just information, right? I say that word, everybody has a thought on what it means. Is it using shot attempts to guess at possession? Is it counting zone exits or entries? Is it, in Colorado's case, perhaps, is it if we dump it into this corner and put our F1 here and F2 there, what's the likelihood that we're going to generate a turnover and keep it in the offensive zone, right? All of that is information. To get from information to execution requires an awful lot of steps. So I see some criticism of this piece, and it's like, well, geez, I mean, if it's just as simple as using analytics, why didn't they win all those games in the regular season? Why don't teams like Toronto win all of the time? There are still people at the other end of the execution here. There are people who need to take the information that they have, make intelligent decisions, as Jared Bednar and his staff did, about how to modify their game to just give themselves a little bit more in certain areas, like the Avalanche forecheck. And then there's the execution on the player's part. That's an awful lot of work and an awful lot of steps to get right. You can't do that nearly as effectively during an 82-game season where you're playing 3 games in 7 nights or 4 games in 7 nights. You got to prepare for one team, then the next, then the next. You can't be switching your game around or making tweaks every single night that you play. When you size up a team for a 7-game round, and that's the only team you're going to play without adjustments or without modifications, well, then that's a time for your staff, whether it's the analytics side, whether it's a coach who just saw a tweak or a read that he made, whether it's a player that says, hey, whenever I go in on Neil Pionk, he turns this way better than that way. Like little things, whatever the source of the information is, there's an enormous amount that goes between that moment and then adapting to how a team plays. There's another element of criticism that I've heard, which is, well, hey, Jared Bednar said that, hey, we only made a little bit of tweaks or what have you. And let me tell you, I had conversations with Jared Bednar in media scrums multiple times over the course of that series. There is no doubt in my mind that the systemic tweaks that they made to their forecheck were made with Winnipeg's weaknesses in mind. And yes, at times he told me, hey, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that. We made modifications. I'm not going to get into those. Believe me that was a coaching staff that knew exactly what was doing, whether the source was the analytics department, which I think that in a large case it was, or their own selves. They put the work in. And I think that was one of the several ways in which Winnipeg was outclassed in that series. And it's an area that presumably without a salary cap limiting it should be an area where Winnipeg can improve.
Well, and I think that will be top of mind for Kevin Cheveldayoff and the rest of the group, when discussing, the potential next head coach. I mean, we've got a bunch of interesting names in your piece in The Athletic, but let's start with Scott Arniel because he is thought to be the favorite. I mean, 2 years ago, you wrote and many others, it sort of felt like there was that built-in succession plan when Rick Bowness came on board. A lot of positives happened on Arnie's watch this year, particularly the way the team played when Bones was away from the club. There's also, we're seeing it now, how important special teams is. And the PK was not a strength of the Winnipeg Jets, and that was something that Scott was in charge of this year. I mean, just from your thoughts right now, as we look back at these last 2 seasons, what are the pros and the cons for Arnie as the potential next head coach of Winnipeg?
Well, one of the pros is just selfish. I liked talking to him in the media scrums. I thought that he was a thoughtful guy. He took his time on his answers, and I really liked his approach to the conversations he had with us. So that's just a selfish person.
It seems the players did too, though. I will say that.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Like, there is the pros are, what I've been hearing is a sense that the players appreciate him, that they really did have a lot of confidence in Scott Arniel's approach before the games, during the games, bench management. I think that there was a sense of calm and comfort when he was at the helm. That 9-2-2 record in the first half of the season when he took over, I think that was one of the bright spots of Winnipeg's season. Now, his final record, I think this year, was 10-5-2 because he was behind the bench with Bonus attending to his minor medical procedure during some of their roughest games as well. I mean, they had that good one in New York that everybody thought, hey, they've got things sorted, and then they got tuned against the Devils and Islanders. And I think Capitals as well. It was a tough time. So I don't think it's as simple as they won with him in. He's great, but I do think there's a lot of confidence in him, and I think that the players should have a big say in this. Like, if you asked me who should be the coach, I would say I don't have enough information. I would say that I would want some consultation done. I would want to know what the players thought, and I would want to know what the coach's plans were to address areas of weakness. A big part for me is on the data side, where I don't think Winnipeg makes enough use of its staff to that degree. Another side would be with regard to special teams, where Winnipeg was thoroughly beaten. Its power play came around, especially with Monahan and Velarde in the lineup. When those were both on a power play unit, Winnipeg's power play actually produced goals at a pretty elite rate. But that PK looked so passive to me. Is that by design? Is that of a fear that they're going to get carved open if they get a little bit more aggressive? When they started getting aggressive, if they chased pucks down for 50-50 battles on the wall, they often didn't win them. If they did, they didn't get clears. And when they didn't get those clears and possession went the other way, then they got carved for the exact same seam passes that staying passive was supposed to keep them away from. So what's the coach's thoughts on that? Is there an answer? And is it more nuanced than, hey, we lost Saku Maenalainen? It's got to be better than that. And I think that some of that information gathering is why I feel so strongly that Winnipeg needs to take its time with this.
I was watching the Stars Avs game last night, and it's 3-0, and it looks like it's all Dallas, and all it took was one penalty, 13 seconds in, and boom, the Avalanche are right back in the game. And against an elite team like Dallas, it did remind me that, okay, well, the Avalanche are going to do this to a lot of teams because of what they bring out there. But at the end of the day, if you want to be able to compete with these teams, you cannot be taking it on the chin the way the Winnipeg Jets did. And the numbers say that for all of the first round of the playoffs. I mean, every team that won the special teams battle won their series. And I mean, getting better in those departments has to be a major priority, regardless of who the new bench boss is.
100%. Special teams battles won, like you said, every series. There's a lot of parity, right, at 5-on-5, and there's a lot of good play at 5-on-5 from the best 16 teams in the NHL every year. But I think that talking about this draws our attention to some cold, hard truths. What's the goal here? Is Winnipeg's goal, under the window that is the contracts to Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck, is it to win a Stanley Cup? Yes, I believe that it is. I think they're all in on winning. They keep telling us that. They make the moves to that effect. They spend the money to that effect. That's the goal. If that's the case, then where are you starting from? And one of the issues that Winnipeg faces is that its top-end talent, you put Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor up against Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Roope Hintz, Jason Robertson. That's 4 out of 8 playoff teams, and you can say that Winnipeg's not going to come out of that matchup with a win, particularly at 5-on-5. So, okay, you don't throw them out because they're not amongst the 2 or 3 best players in the world. You build a team around that. And one of Winnipeg's strengths, of course, is the sheer number of great forwards that they do have, including those 2 players. You can't give things up on the margins, though. Winnipeg, without that elite McDavid, McKinnon type talent, needs to be conscientious of every last little detail in those margins, and coaching being one, matchups being another. Their deployment is a big issue. Special teams have to be a source of success if Winnipeg is going to have success to a win rounds in the playoffs type of capacity. They're already good enough to make the playoffs. I think that's tough for me to see them missing with any consistency in the next several years. But if they're going to take the next step, they can't leave those margins behind. The PK was definitely one of them. And without that kind of elite talent, well, I mean, that's a problem that's going to haunt them until it's solved.
Building on what Rick Bowness and his staff built for the last couple of seasons, you know, the culture's been improved. Certainly the performance through the regular season was excellent. But getting over the hump and being a better playoff team is the next step for this team. We've talked about Scott Arniel, who certainly is at the top of the list. Who are some of the other most intriguing candidates for you after going through a pretty lengthy list of potential guys that, you know, the Jets could have a conversation with?
You know, it's just remarkable how many coaching candidates there are, which is another reason I think Winnipeg should take their time with this. One of the more interesting names, and I got to give credit to Patrick Williams for the tweet that made me go down this rabbit hole, but he referenced Hershey Bears coach Todd Nelson, who's had just a tremendous run in the AHL, winning a lot of championships there. He's in the playoffs with the chance to do it all over again this year. I think he's just won Coach of the Year in the AHL as well. He has some NHL experience back when the Oilers were a bit of on their way to drafting Connor McDavid team. They were struggling badly. It was a short audition, and he was moved back to the AHL at that time. But to dig deeper into his philosophies, we have had somebody on staff at The Athletic named Jonathan Willis who had so many conversations with Todd Nelson. I've been able to dig up the vault, the philosophies, his approach to young players. That's one that I have a lot of time for. If you're looking to promote a next wave coach, that's one that interests me. I know there's a proud Manitoban in Dean Evison whose level of intensity might be a fun thing to watch with Winnipeg's players, though I'm not sure that's the fit the Jets are necessarily looking for. You go down the list, I mean, everybody has a wish list. David Carl in college is just a phenomenal coach, doing even better with Denver than Jim Montgomery did once upon a time. I don't think that's on the table. I don't think any NHL team is on the table for him yet. And I'm also curious about Sheldon Keefe. Should the Maple Leafs let him go? Another younger guy, has a better winning percentage with that Maple Leafs core than Mike Babcock did before him. Certainly they're leaving playoff results on the table too, and I'm not sold when I hear him speak all of the time, but the results have largely been there behind that core. So those are some names, but we go over 11 candidates in that piece and leave names on the table. There's a lot of options out there.
You know, Keefe, and again, Keefe is still the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, although that may change in the next couple days. We understand that there's a bunch of management meetings right now. We're going to hear from Shanahan and Treleving, and I guess Keith Pelly as well on Friday. But I will admit, maybe this is sort of built in with just the media that we get and consume. There's always so much Leafs there. But I will admit, Sheldon Keefe, very intriguing candidate to me, you know, with where he is in his life. And, you know, often, and you can say this about Arniel as well, although it happened, you know, much longer ago, there's a lot of great coaches that learn a ton in their first stop that use, you know, the tough lessons learned to be even better in their next step. And listen, I think there's a lot of things to like about Sheldon Keefe with the way he handles his players and the way he does the job. You can't say that wasn't a really good hockey team for the last number of years. Similar to the Jets, though, they weren't able to get over the hump. But I don't hear a lot of people saying, oh, they were just simply outcoached. I mean, they battled back and played some of their best hockey, certainly defensively, when they didn't have Austin Matthews, found a way to win those games. And literally the difference between winning and losing and having Keith be great, the guy that led them from down 3-1, is razor thin, and it didn't go their way. But I think he's going to get another chance somewhere, and I think when he does, he's going to be a heck of an NHL coach.
I mean, I like a lot of what you said there, to be honest. I think that coaching is one of those things in life where we have seen it a lot of times, lessons learned, but not quite solved in one market, do move forward with coaches. I think that there's a lot of reflection that goes into that position, and I have time for Keefe for those reasons as well. I also agree with you that, like, let's be careful about the narratives that we spin based on a win or a loss, right? Like, there are players who, let's say, how do I put this? There are players on teams that don't win, that never get painted with that winner's brush, that would help so many teams. And there's players on championship quality teams who score a lot of goals or who have small sample size runs where everything bounces their way, that we anoint winners for the rest of their lives, even if the results never follow. And like, I think of, I don't know why, of all names, this might not hit with too many people because it's a smaller name, but Mike Rupp scoring 2 goals to win the cup for the New Jersey Devils. What kind of career did he go on to have after that fact, right? Like, there are, history is, I think, a little bit too kind to people who happen to be on winning teams and a little bit too unkind to people who happen to be on losing teams, while still acknowledging that there are lessons that get learned from all that. All of this to say, I have time for Sheldon Keefe. The interesting thing for me, and one of the things that I think Winnipeg has left on the table, when you watch these great offensive clubs, and Toronto's one of them, Colorado's another, Boston, Carolina, New York, when they're creating scoring chances, Dallas, oh my goodness, when they're creating scoring chances in the offensive zone, they are doing things that put their thumbs on the scale of their own odds to score. The amount of traffic they get, great. Every coach has talked about traffic forever. But the amount of movement, right? When we look at things that make a goaltender's life difficult, traffic is one. Multiple layers of screen is another. Deflections are another. You can run those at goalies, and sometimes their save percentages will be ugly. We've known that forever. But the amount of side-to-side movement that these offenses create, that is a modern offensive tweak, last 5, 6, 7 years, that I think Winnipeg is actually missing out on a little bit. They have plans to move the puck into the middle of the ice and then force a goaltender to move laterally from whether they're starting that play on the boards, the end wall, the point. There are more ideas in these teams than I've seen Winnipeg put forward. And that might be one of the reasons why I have some confidence in Keefe, because Toronto has been that type of team, creating offense from the middle of the ice, but also laterally in a whole bunch of different ways. That's an area to like from him and a lot of the modern coaches.
Yeah, and man, we saw that on display last night with those 4 teams that were playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs in those 2 awesome overtime games. Murat of The Athletic is with us. Hey, before we go, moving away from coaching, just want to ask you right now, fresh off of the playoffs, how different do you think this roster will be next year when we get to September?
I think that there's going to be a first-line quality left/right wing missing from it. So that's going to be one.
Would he happen to wear number 27?
One, yes, he does. Yes, he does. And look, don't let me be the guy that says this is definitely happening. You know what I mean? There, so many things can change depending on the coaching, depending on off-season reflection and what have you. But I'm under the impression that Nikolai Ehlers is going to be shopped. And I'm under the expectation, more likely than not, that he's going to be moved, likely before the draft. You're going to see Winnipeg doesn't have a first-round pick. It gave that up. Winnipeg might recoup one in a deal like that. I think that that's not a knock on Nikolai Ehlers' quality. You know that I believe in this player's ability at 5-on-5 to score as much as he does, as frequently as he does. The amount of goals and first assists that he gets at even strength for the minutes that he has, one of the top 5-on-5 players on the planet. Certainly he hasn't gotten it done in the playoffs, and that'll be a knock against him. But I think the reason that this is on the table is because his contract is up in a year, and there's going to be issues when it comes to retention. Remember, when he was asked what Winnipeg did so well during the regular season that like they couldn't get to during the playoffs, he pointed to a 35-game stretch when the Jets were forechecking with a ton of pressure and aggression and moved to first place in the standings. What else happened during that 35-game stretch? A lot of Nikolai Ehlers on the first line, right? And I'm not saying that I can read between Nikolai Ehlers' thoughts and lines or what have you, but I think it's a little bit telling. I think after all these years, there may be a sense that there's more opportunity elsewhere for him, and that's a trade that you might see go down this summer. On defense, that's where I have more questions. I don't think it's going to be dramatically transformed, but Kevin Cheveldayoff didn't take buyouts off the table. And when I asked him about buyouts, I didn't name these players, but I think about players like Nate Schmidt, who was in and out of the lineup. And I think about players like Neil Pionk, a year away from free agency, who was really outmatched as that season went along. And, if you look at the full body of his work, I've liked stretches of it, but those stretches have been outnumbered. I don't think both of those players are on the table for that. And I'm not even sure that one of them is, but it's possible to open up cap space that way. I think the Jets would love to sign Dylan DeMello, and that's mutual. I think they'd like to sign Brendan Dillon, and we'll see if that happens. I think there's a decent chance of it as well. But if you do that, add them to Josh Morrissey and Dylan Sandberg, and then sort out the rest of it, that's not a dramatic transformation on defense either. The only question is if Elias Salomonsson can force himself into that conversation. Ville Heinola will have lost his waivers exemption. And up front, of course, Brad Lambert is probably in the mix for a job. Same with Nikita Chibrikov.
Murat, great stuff as always. We're just getting going on the offseason. A lot of interesting conversations coming up as we get closer to June, the draft, a potential new head coach, and some player movement that more often than not happens in and around the draft. Appreciate you as always, and really enjoyed your latest piece on potential coaching candidates for the Winnipeg Jets at The Athletic.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. There is Murat Atesh, and again, of course, you're probably already following him on X. You should be at WPG Murat, and you definitely should be subscribing to The Athletic. Great piece up right now for Murat. Well, guys, it is absolutely beautiful out today, and it's going to be for the next few days. But it is Wednesday, and our friends down at Next Door at 116 Sherbrooke in the heart of Wolseley have a Wingy Wednesday today. If you haven't been by Next Door, a beautiful spot in the heart of Wolseley with unbelievable food put together by the Cosmos guys, great beer. And of course, it's the Cosmo and Hoagie Boys that handle both the beer can as well as Next Door. But if you're a wing person, you got to check out their wing night, which is today. A pound of naked wings for $15, but the kicker is they have a sauce cart where you get to choose your own sauces, mix and match, and pour as much as you want from 14 house-made sauces. The new sauce this week is Maui Wowie, a saucy, savory soy ginger scallion mix. So get down to Next Door. And by the way, the women that run, they're big supporters of the PWHL, working on a PWHL watch party coming up for the playoffs, which are actually getting underway tonight. So we'll keep you up to date on that. But definitely pop down and check them out. And tell them your friends at Winnipeg Sports Talk sent you. The gang at Wallace & Wallace are busy right now because it is fencing and overhead door time. And if you have needs when it comes to fencing, Wallace & Wallace have been the experts for over 70 years here in town. They've got them all. You've got the welded wire, chain link, wood fences, everything you need for a great fence by the experts that have been doing it for so long. And of course, if you do need an overhead garage door, they're the best in the biz for that as well. Pop by and see them or give them a call, 452-2700. The Wallace & Wallace team will arrange a time to come out and give you a free estimate. You can also visit them at wallacefences.com or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Crescent off of Kenniston. And hey, fellas, if you need a new look coming into spring and summer wedding season, head on down to F Apparel and up your menswear game. Custom suits beginning at $400 along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. 15% discount for wedding parties. And they got a great deal on right now for suits for high school grads as well. You can find out more at 190 Smith Street downtown. Check them out online and make an appointment to come in for a fitting at EPHapparel.com. Hey, big cheers to the Winnipeg Gold Eyes. One more day until opening day in Cleburne. And we're less than 2 weeks away from the Gold Eyes home opener on May 21st at Blue Cross Park. We're wishing Logan Watkins, the new manager, and the squad well as he goes up against his old team for the first 6 games down in Cleburne. Stay tuned to Winnipeg Sports Talk for information on our WST patio party and for bookings, tickets, groups, and more. 982-BASE or go to goldeyes.com. All right, well, the big news last night in the NHL, the San Jose Sharks winning the draft lottery. How big of a deal is that for San Jose? And what is the rest of the first round looking like? Let's find out with our pal Chris Peters from Flow Hockey right now. Chris, what's up, man? Great to have you back on WST.
Hustler, it's great to be with you, man. I mean, this is I'm still a little jet lagged, so I hope that I can be coherent throughout this this entire interview, but I make no promises at this point.
Hey, no worries at all. It's just great to have you here. By the way, just how was the tournament? I mean, Finland U18s is one that doesn't get the same attention as the under 20s, but I imagine for scouts in the NHL draft, it's a big one.
Yeah, for the draft for sure. It's a hugely important event, and I think the best thing about it is that you get this collection of players, especially the European players that you might not have seen on a daily, a regular basis. Obviously, your area scouts see them, but this is the one that general managers fly in for. Every scouting director is there. A lot of assistant GMs are there. So it's a major event. I think there are probably more scouts at this than there typically are even at the World Juniors. Just because of the importance of the event, though there are a ton there as well. And this year in terms of 2024 draft talent, it wasn't an amazing tournament. The tournament has been weakened by the absence of Russia, which we all know why they're not there. And, politically, that's fine. On the hockey side of things, it dramatically impacts the quality of the tournament and the number of games that you're going to actually get that are quality games, and certainly the number of prospects that you're going to see that are quality prospects. So, but the good news is that if you were looking forward to 2025 or even the 2026 draft, there was a lot to watch because there were a lot of underagers there. James Hagan's led the tournament in scoring, draft eligible in 2025. Gavin McKenna, draft eligible in 2026, new Canadian record, has 4 points in the gold medal game. Porter Martone captains Canada and has 17 points, second most points ever at that tournament, only to McKenna. And so, I mean, we were seeing these historic performances for guys that are a little bit further down the road, but it does make you excited for the coming drafts as well.
Well, the fans in San Jose finally had something to get excited about last night when the lottery balls went their way. And it was interesting seeing Macklin Celebrini there, essentially anointed as the number one pick on live television by the league beforehand. But certainly talking to people in the business like yourself, it really does seem like it's Macklin Celebrini and then everybody else. How big of a moment was that for the Sharks organization, which is frankly in disarray right now, but they're getting an incredible young player.
I think last night was the biggest night in Sharks history. Bar down, you just fully that's bar none. That was the most important night in that organization's history. And you think about that's a team that's been around for 30 years here in the NHL and has had great moments. They've had Patrick Marleau, they've had Joe Thornton. I think Macklin Celebrini is the foundation on which you build the future of the San Jose Sharks. And you have the added benefit that, he spent a little time in the Bay Area. His dad works for the Golden State Warriors. He played for the Junior Sharks for 1 year. He is, to me, the gap between him and the next players in this draft is substantial. So he's the clear-cut number one guy. The other thing that I think, because he played in college hockey, because, I don't think he had the gaudy point totals that Connor Bedard has, the hype train for Celebrini did not get to the fever pitch of Connor Bedard. But I really do feel that the gap between Bedard and Celebrini is not that significant because Celebrini he's a different player. He doesn't score goals at the same rate as a Connor Bedard, but he is a defensive stalwart. He is a legit two-way center. I mean, he's a guy that I think eventually, as he rounds out his game, will contend for Selke trophies when all is said and done. But on top of that, he wins the Hobey Baker in college hockey as a 17-year-old freshman. And I don't think that we fully, it doesn't happen often where 17-year-olds play college hockey. He won't turn 18 until this summer, right before the draft. And so, this is a guy that was so young, but yet by far the best player in the college game this year. It took Boston University to a Frozen Four. I think really was such a substantial piece for that team and such a substantial piece in college hockey that, I think we're we're seeing the introduction of a future number one center in the NHL. So, I think there's a lot to like about Celebrini overall, and I think that there's a lot more to learn about where his game's going to go. But to me, the San Jose Sharks have the face of their franchise for the next however long they want, and however long Macklin Celebrini is going to be there. And maybe this is the guy that ultimately helps them get over the hump.
Just hearing you talk about that, I mean, 17 years old, just playing in the NCAA is rare. Winning the Hobie, I mean, was this an unprecedented season for a player of his age?
It was. I mean, it's funny because you look back at the history of college hockey. I think there was something around like 140 or so skaters that played college hockey in their U18 season. And there was only one player that had more points than Celebrini, and that was Craig Simpson. And Craig Simpson's one of the most unique college hockey players in the history of the game. But he was playing in the 1980s when everybody was scoring 80 plus points in a season, and he was playing at Michigan State. And Simpson actually played in NCAA hockey as a 16-year-old, which is crazy to think about as well. But in terms of, there are 4 freshmen that have won the Hobie Baker Award. It was Macklin Celebrini now, Adam Fantilli last year, Jack Eichel the year before, or a few years before that, and then Paul Kariya in 1993. Or 92. So basically, all of those guys were older than Celebrini was. Celebrini is the youngest ever Hobie Baker winner. And to see Jonathan Toews was another guy that played in his U18 season in college hockey. And so and he's often the player that I've compared Celebrini to in terms of, the way that he plays. I think that Celebrini is going to impact the game the same way that Jonathan Toews did in his peak. Just because I think his defensive game is so good. He still has the offensive capabilities, the skill, the hockey sense, all those things. But yes, I mean, like the short answer is what he did this year is truly unprecedented, especially at his age, for college hockey, and to see what, especially in the modern era of college hockey, because, Craig Simpson did have more points, but it was a different time in the 80s, and there were the scoring was much higher back then, even in college hockey. But yeah, to see Macklin Celebrini when college hockey, I think, is at its best that it's ever been in terms of the quality. That's the other thing that makes this really even more remarkable, because we've seen many more elite players come through the NCAA ranks over the last 10 plus years.
So, Chris, we saw the smile on Mike Greer's face. We didn't see the immediate reaction from Kyle Davison, but I imagine, listen, they got Connor Bedard. They can't complain. But
yeah,
how big of a miss was it for the Blackhawks? I mean, the drop-off from Celebrini to what they will have on the table at 2, how significant?
Well, the thing is, I think that the gap exists because of the quality of Celebrini being so high, because the next tier of players is really, really good. And I think that the Blackhawks are going to still get a foundational piece for their rebuild. They're going to get, I think they have 2 choices at the number 2 pick. It's Ivan Demidov, who is an elite scoring winger from Russia, averaged 2 points a game in the Russian U20 league this year, absolutely crushed their playoff season in terms of point production. I think it was something around 28 points in 11 games or something like that, something ridiculous. And that's a guy that complements Connor Bedard. Now you have 2 guys that you have to worry about that are elite level forwards. The other option to me is Artem Levshinov, who's the top right shot defenseman in this draft class, as far as I'm concerned, played at Michigan State this year. He's Belarusian. He took a bit of a different path as a result. He goes USHL college hockey. He was one of the best defensemen in college hockey, a second-team All-American in his freshman season at Michigan State. That's really incredible as well, considering the transition from USHL to being a number 1 defenseman in college hockey right out the gates for a national title contending team. So I think that's really the 2 choices that they have at their disposal. Now you could talk maybe Caden Lindstrom's in that mix, maybe one of the other defensemen, Anton Silayev, but they have left shot defensemen in spades. They really want to get a right shot defenseman. So to me, the Blackhawks are the only thing that they were worried about, I think, was falling out of the top 4. Because then all of a sudden Demidov's probably off the table. Levshinov might be off the table as well. And so I think that by everything staying the same, they're still sitting very pretty. Now, would a 1-2 punch of Macklin Celebrini and Connor Bedard be incredible? Absolutely. I think it'd be the brand new, having Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane all over again, except they're both centers. So, that's the kind of amazing thing that, yes, you do miss out on that. But I think having a Bedard plus one of the 2 guys that I just mentioned, that's a really nice foundation set for their rebuild.
Chris Peters with us from Flow Hockey, getting ready for the draft next month in Vegas. Chris, I'm looking at your latest mock post-draft lottery, and one thing that stands out is, just focusing in on the top 10, how many defense prospects are quite high on the list?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a run on defensemen pretty early in this draft. I think that the gap between some of these defensemen and the forwards, I don't think it's huge, but I think the positional scarcity of the quality of these defensemen is really going to be what drives that run. I mentioned Lev Shinov, but then there's Anton Salayev, who's a 6'7" defenseman out of Russia. Can produce, he can skate, he can hit, he can do all those things. The upside is tremendous there. You look at what Sam Dickinson is doing for the London Knights right now in the OHL and in the playoffs. I mean, he's a 6'3" defenseman. And, I was just kind of playing with a bunch of filters, and I was like, I'm guessing not a lot of 6'3" defensemen have had 70 plus points as an under 18 player in the OHL. Turns out there was only one other player that did that. So, we're talking about a guy that really has this unique kind of skill and statistical package to go along with his incredible athleticism. But then you also look at the really dynamic offensive players. You say, okay, well, if Quinn Hughes is winning the Norris Trophy this year in a runaway, and you look at Cale Makar, and you look at Adam Fox, and you look at these players that are the new age defensemen in the NHL that are taking over the league, you say, we need a guy that has that dynamic offensive ability. Well, then you've got Zane Parekh and Zeev Buyum, who are both guys that are right around 6 foot, that are both highly productive. Parekh had 96 points in the OHL this year from the back end. Zeev Buyum had the highest scoring season by a draft-eligible freshman defenseman in the NCAA. So this is really, two guys that could be change the game from the back end. You also look at Carter Yakimchuk out of the Calgary Hitmen and different players that he's a dynamic offensive player. 30 goals this year in the WHL, and he's a 6'3" right shot defenseman. So you look at that and you're like, wow. And then on top of that, you have these really interesting centers, Caden Lindstrom, Consta Helenius, Berkeley Catton, that could disrupt things in terms of the run on defensemen. But as I'm making that mock and I'm looking at the teams in the order that they fell in, it just seems like they're going to be able to address both needs and top quality prospects by taking a defenseman.
One name I can't not ask you about is a very familiar name to a lot of fans, even if they haven't been paying attention to the draft at all. TJ Ginla, the son of Flames great Jerome Ginla. He seemed like, from what I remember our conversations last year at the draft, he seems to be one of the biggest risers this year. Is that fair? And what sort of a player is an NHL team going to get when they draft Jerome's kid?
Yeah, I think Tej has definitely been a major riser this year. It's been a little interesting to see. I've seen some places are saying, he's probably in that could potentially get in that top 5 range. That's a little rich for me, even though I think he's a tremendous player. But yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is that Calgary is going to be right in the range where I think he's going to be. And he was on the board in my mock draft, and I passed him over, which I think Flames fans would absolutely have a coronary if that happened. But what I do think that the Flames are in a very delicate position themselves in their rebuild. We can get to that later. But as far as TJ Ginla is concerned, he was at the World Under 18 Championship that I was just at. He was one of Canada's best forwards. He had big plays all over the ice. He has these pro habits that I think are really difficult to teach, which is he's aggressive on the puck. He has those little subtle touches where he's able to kind of disrupt the other team, and that either creates a turnover. He set up basically Gavin McKenna's goal that was the first goal for Canada in that gold medal game, where he just disrupts with his stick, knocks a puck loose, gets it to McKenna, and then it's a tie game at that point. So that was he does that, but then he's got these really quick hands, a great release. He's still growing. He's about 6 foot. He's close to 6 foot right now. He needs to fill out more. He needs to be stronger. But, obviously we've seen the genes in his family. We've seen what Jerome Ginla grew into as a player. And I think Tej is really, has that capability, that potential to grow into a player of a, maybe not of the highest caliber like his dad was, but still as a star player in the NHL, which is pretty darn impressive. So that'll be a really interesting thing, because I think Calgary, he's going to be there. I think, it's not a guarantee, but I think he's going to be there. And if he is, and you've got Jerome on staff, Jerome was at the World Under 18s with Calgary, with, as dad, but also as Calgary, so there's a lot of different elements there. And obviously, you know, Craig Conroy, knowing the family as well as he does, it's going to be very difficult for him. But I also think there's going to be a center available, and I think that's the direction that Calgary needs to go in as an organization, because I think Tej is a long-term winger. You know, and then what if a Konsta Helenius is there, who's going to be a top 6 forward for Finland at the Men's World Championship? You know, what if Berkeley Catton is there, and you feel like he has that dynamic element that can, you know, be there down the middle? What if by some way Caden Lindstrom falls into your lap? You know, those are the different things that you have to kind of consider. But Tej Ginla, unquestionably a major draft riser. You know, I think that in the early parts of the season, you always temper expectations for the guys that are the sons of great NHL players. You don't want to put too much pressure on him early. He has risen to the occasion. I mean, you look at his WHL season, you look at his under-18 Worlds, tremendous output by him.
The drama, if Calgary's on the clock and he's there, is going to be, I mean, potentially the moment outside of Celebrini going, the moment of the draft, and certainly the most fun time for everyone to talk to each other before we get the word that the pick is in. Overall of this draft right now, Chris, we know there's a superstar in Celebrini, still some really good players in that next tier. How deep is the draft? Like the overall quality of it in your mind?
I think really this was a great year to be in the lottery, and an okay year to be outside. Outside of it. I really do think that there is a precipitous drop off, you know, after the top 15 or so players. I think that there's a lot of guys that are similar that have a lot of those questions that you're like, you know, I don't know if that guy really fits, or, you know, there's this thing that bothers me, or there's a skating issue, or there's a compete issue with some of these players. You know, so I think that really, you know, as I've watched this draft class, there have been fewer and fewer players that have gotten me excited about what's available really after the first half of the first round. There are absolutely NHL players there. There are absolutely guys that are going to be impact players in the NHL. I just think it's less obvious for a lot of these players. You know, I think it'll be very interesting to see how many teams are going to, you know, as we get into the second day of the draft, how many teams are going to dip into re-entry players, which has become a bit of a growing trend, where there are players that are in their second or third year of eligibility and they just look more attractive than some of the guys in this class. You might see players like that go in day 2, because I think that to me also indicates a little bit of a weakness of the draft class. I think it's a pretty weak year in Europe overall, in terms of, you know, there aren't going to be, we saw that tremendous run on Slovakian players for a while. You won't see that. You know, we've seen there might be a couple Czech players that could go. But, you know, beyond that, there's not a lot there. And you've got 2 big guys from Russia. You got a couple more that I think teams are excited about. It's a very weak year for goaltending as well. I don't think that there's certainly not a first round goalie in this class. And I don't know if there's a second round goalie in this class. As I've been building my lists, it's been harder for me to work a goalie in, and there may not be one on my top 100 when it's all said and done, just because I have a little bit less belief in that. Now, there's absolutely going to be an NHL goalie in this class somewhere, but I just haven't found them yet. So that's the other thing that I think will kind of play into it. So it's an okay draft. I think if you know, and if you're in the top 20, I think there's a lot of quality there, a lot of players that you can find. But, you know, I think that the scouting staffs have really had their work cut out for them to really find those players that they like a lot from this class. Because I just think, you know, at least in my, and obviously, you know, they're spanned out across the globe. They're seeing more guys than I could possibly see. So, you know, there's going to be guys that they absolutely love that maybe I haven't seen before. So, so I think that's, you know, it's probably a closer to average class with a really, you know, top heavy first round, which is pretty much every draft class ever. The first round looks great and the rest looks okay. Yeah. And that's pretty much where we're at.
Well, it's funny, just from a Jets perspective, I mean, hearing this, I'm sure Jet fans would be like, okay, it's not so bad. I mean, obviously you would have liked to do much better in the playoffs, but they did move their first rounder, which is probably 23rd, 24th, is heading to Montreal. Yet the Montreal second rounder is here from the PLD trade, which is early in the second round. And I guess when the deal was made, there were people in the industry that said the difference between that 23-24 spot and 36-37 is going to be different on literally everybody's board because of the group of players available, very similar at both points.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, to me, one of the most fun portions of the entire draft is the early second round, because I think that's where you get to see some of the real value of your amateur scouting staff. You know, I think that Winnipeg historically has had some really nice mid-round picks that have, you know, become contributors for them. And that's, those guys will still be there. They're always there. I mean, like, that's the thing, is that, you know, these teams, they work so hard all year to find guys that fit what they're looking for. And so when you look at the list, the public lists out there, there's one glaring difference between, if you looked at a public list versus an NHL actual team list, it is going to look dramatically different, because there, as much as there's a consensus in the public, there isn't in the scouting world, because they're all looking for different things. They're drafting to type, they're drafting for fit, they're drafting for need. Sometimes the best available player might not be the guy, you know, that's on the public list, might not be the guy that fits that team systematically. So that's the other thing that kind of comes into play. But that's where I think, you know, the true value of a scouting staff, I think first round picks, it's very rare anymore that teams get those so awfully wrong, where it's just a complete bust of a player. But in that second round, there's still so much value, and you're going to find a guy that can, you know, that you like a lot, that maybe you even had in the first round on your particular board. And so that's what makes the early portion of day two, to me, arguably the most exciting part of the draft.
Hey, Chris, just before we go, I wanted to ask you about a couple players that we don't see all the time. We've talked a lot about Elias Salmonsson this year. Of course, he was a second rounder by the Jets in 2022. Just finished winning a championship, playing a big role on that Swedish championship team. You get a chance to see him at all? And can you tell us about his progress since he's been picked?
Oh, yes. I have seen him. And certainly I think the trajectory for him has been really remarkable to watch, because, you know, we knew he was big. We knew he was a right shot. In his draft season, he was a guy that I think came into the year with first round expectations, a guy that we thought, you know, this is a guy, this could be one of the guys in Sweden. Didn't necessarily play up to that standard. And as a result, you know, he slips to 55th overall. And this is where we're talking about where that value comes into play. Well, you take that right shot defenseman with upside, and what we've seen this year in terms of what he's become, much better defensively, a physical player, a guy that really gets in there. He had a really nice playoff. He plays big minutes, you know, for a player of his age in the professional ranks, you know, to have top 4 minutes at this stage. And then to be, you know, basically a nail gun with the way that he's hitting people, that's been pretty good to see. So I think, you know, you look at the guys that the Jets have had, like the Dylan Sandbergs of the world, players like that, where, you know, this is the kind of, Salomonsson is probably going to be one of those guys that fits in with what they're doing. He's gotten physically stronger, he's gotten more confident, and he's defended far better. And I think his habits have improved too. There were a lot of times in his draft season where he just wasn't as engaged, and you could just see that there was something just was not clicking for him. And I think it's clicking now, and especially now you win a championship in Sweden. You know, you play at the World Juniors. You do all these different things that you know are kind of these touchstone moments for any prospect, and he's really shown well in all of those situations.
You know, one other Jet prospect that honestly, and I'm guilty of this. You know, we're focusing on the guys with the Moose and the guys in junior. I mean, Russia kind of seems to be like just in another world right now with their situation, but. I was going back through the draft classes, and I got digging into Dmitry Reshevsky's numbers, and you look at what he's done with Moscow Dynamo, and I mean, 24 goals in the KHL is no joke. You had a chance to see him or have any sort of an update on his game?
Yeah, you know, saw a little bit of Moscow just while looking at Chernyshov, who's one of the draft prospects this year. So I would be lying to you if I said I zeroed in on Reshevsky very much in terms of those viewings, but at the same time, these guys follow this pattern, and you look at the growth in the KHL. It's a hard league to score in. It's especially hard for the younger players. This year he kind of got into that middle six role, and then 24 goals is a lot. He's definitely has the size. I think when he was selected, there's always this kind of question of, whether they're going to come or not. I think he still has at least another year on his contract in the KHL. But that's a guy that you say, okay, well, we're seeing enough progression. and he's playing at a high enough level for a 5th round pick. That's a guy that, seems like an easy contract. Like I think that's you get your 50 contracts a year, and I think after next season, you'd probably be looking to get him over right away and see what you have. I think sometimes those guys would benefit from the AHL, but it's really hard to get those KHL players to get interested in playing in the AHL before they make that jump to the NHL. And then, as we've seen with players in the past that have done that, they have come to the NHL, didn't work out, wouldn't accept a demotion, and then go home. So that is the one thing. But I think if you're the Jets and you're saying he was a 5th round draft pick, he was a guy that we are not super, we haven't necessarily invested a ton in yet. That's basically you're playing with house money at that point. You're feeling good about it. And then if he's willing to sign a contract and maybe, be patient in terms of how long it takes him to get a full-time NHL job, then, you might have something there.
Yeah, he had a 2-year deal signed last August, so 1 more year on the current deal with Moscow Dynamo, and then potentially a crack at the National Hockey League. Hey, just on Russians, just before we go, how much of a crapshoot is it drafting and scouting Russians right now, for this particular NHL draft, just considering the political climate and the fact that they're not at any of these international events?
Yeah, it was interesting talking to a lot of European-based scouts. I think that there's a high level of frustration among them of not being able to get into Russia to scout these players. The teams that have Russian-based scouts, good Russian-based scouts, are feeling very comfortable about drafting Russians. They are getting, more conversations with these players. They're getting more information from people on the ground. The teams that do not have a Russian-based scout are definitely feeling the fear and the hey, we're watching them on video. We haven't had much interaction with them. Some of these guys do have North American agents, many do not. And so that makes it a little difficult to make the connection. But I think for the top tier players, the top tier Russian players, Demidov, Silayev, guys like that, there's really no fear in drafting them, because I think the general feeling among NHL people is if you are a top player, you want to be an NHL player. And that still is true. Matvei Michkov went 7th overall last year in the draft. I think Philadelphia has a legit, potential superstar talent on their hands. They just have to wait for him, but he'll come over. It's the guys like Reshevsky, guys that are drafted in the mid rounds, guys that you might have, getting them over is a bit of a challenge because they're making decent money where they are. There is a ton of pressure on those guys to stay. There is a ton. That is one thing that is legitimately happening right now, where they're getting, big money offers to stay. They're under pressure for different things. Say they might be, threatened with not being part of the national team whenever the national team comes back. I mean, there are all those different things that kind of come into play for some of the guys that are in the mid tier. But I think for teams are still drafting them. I think we saw last year the Russian fear was overhyped. It was overblown. And teams continue to draft Russian players. So I do think that we'll still continue to see that. But to me, I think that the thing that I find most concerning about drafting a Russian player isn't whether or not they're going to come over. It's how they're being developed while they're there. Because as we're seeing with Ivan Demidov, he had to play all season in the U20 league, despite the fact that he was way better than the U20 league this year, averaging 2 points a game. Just really didn't get much of a sniff at the KHL level. And when they do get to the KHL, they play low minutes, unless they're a high-end player like a Danila Yurov, who was outstanding this year, and he's a Minnesota Wild draft pick. So that's the thing that I find concerning, is that you have no control over their development. You have very little contact between when they're drafted and when they sign. That does create a little bit of risk, but at the same time, if you are comfortable with the player and you've scouted the player and you have your Russian scouts blessing and everything else, I do think that the NHL teams will continue to heavily scout and heavily invest in Russian players.
Chris, thanks so much for doing this. We'll look forward to seeing you for one more, hopefully fun draft with everyone around the National Hockey League getting together in Vegas later on next month. Have a good one, and get that jet lag out, get some sleep, and get back on North American time.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. Thanks a lot for having me. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And yeah, let's enjoy the rest of this playoffs and the draft season.
You train day in and day out, learning new techniques, approaching new concepts, and living out the thrill of achieving your goals. Building a craft beer is no different. While you spend your hours on the ice, we spend ours here, brewing our trademark beer. Again, and again. Here's to pushing the status quo and challenging ourselves to build something memorable. 1919 by Little Brown Jug.
We'll have more on the upcoming draft over the course of the next 6 weeks or so. But the big story today in town, back to business for the Bombers at Princess Auto Stadium. Rookie camp is underway, and we're going to head to Princess Auto Stadium in just a couple minutes. Speaking of Princess Auto Stadium, don't forget, big announcement last week. July 1st, Canada Day celebrations at Princess Auto Stadium, completely free. Sam Roberts, Doc Walker, amongst some amazing entertainment. Everyone is invited to celebrate Canada Day with the Bombers, Princess Auto down at Princess Auto Stadium. Of course, Princess Auto Stadium, the home of the blue and gold for the next 10 years. And Princess Auto, founded, headquartered right here in Winnipeg, continuing to support the local sports scene with the Bombers, Jets, Goldeyes, and of course, Winnipeg Sports Talk. Pop by and see Princess Auto, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. You can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. And we'll look forward to seeing you down at Princess Auto Stadium for a preseason game in the month of May for the first time ever. Just before we get down to Darrin Bauming at Princess Auto Stadium, I have to thank our friends at Royal Sports. Spring is here, and Royal Sports is the place for Manitoba's #1 sports superstore to get the biggest and best selection of licensed team gear featuring all the home teams, the Jets, the Bombers, Sea Bears, Goldeyes, NHL, NFL, tons of new MLB gear just in time for the start of the season. And the spring stock is arriving daily with soccer, baseball, softball, tennis equipment, and a huge selection of bikes. Take advantage of this gorgeous weather with a quick trip to Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway, and give them a follow on Instagram as well at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. Well, we finally get the two Canadian teams going at it tonight, and if you're looking for a great spot to watch the game, might I suggest your local Boston Pizza, the place for fans team up for the Cup, for the playoffs. They got the brand new playoff menu featuring wing flights, the new Sicilian square footer pizza, jalapeno popper dip, my personal favorite, and other great chances to win, including a grand prize trip for two to the Stanley Cup final. Oilers and Canucks tonight. Boston Pizza's the place to be. You don't necessarily need to wear your whites like you did for the first round of the playoffs, but get your crew to watch the playoffs at Boston Pizza. Enjoy it and get a chance to win that grand prize trip for two to the Stanley Cup finals. And hey, a quick shout out to our friends at Assiniboia Downs. We're less than 2 weeks away from opening day on the 20th of March, or the 20th of May, excuse me. And I tell you what, Remis and I will be going head to head once again with our daily picks. And we'll get that going on race day. Find out more at AS Downs about the upcoming season. And make an appointment if you'd like a reservation in the clubhouse for that world-famous prime rib buffet on racing nights throughout the year. All right, let's get down to Princess Auto Stadium. Back to work for the Bombers today, albeit the rookies and a very familiar face that was probably taking the majority of the attention. Darrin Bauming of Bonfire Sports back at it. How does it feel to be back at the park, getting ready for the season, DB?
No qualms about it, Hustler. It feels absolutely amazing to be back down here.
Day too.
Yeah, gorgeous. Like the wind from yesterday went away. You know, I was talking to Milt Stiegel. I know we'll get into that in a second, but he was saying he flew into Winnipeg yesterday from balmy Atlanta, Georgia, and he's like, oh man, it's windy. And then waking up today, said he woke up at 3 a.m. He was so excited to get going at Bombers rookie camp on day one here today that, you know, he just couldn't wait. But yeah, perfect weather conditions. There was well over 100, I would say almost 150 Blue Bombers fans here, like coming and going, but consistently, like dozens and dozens of people in their gear, cheering for Milt on the field, taking a look at Kolaris and Streveler and, the veteran quarterbacks that were here, all the young guys and the draft picks that, you know, you and I are going to talk about. But yeah, absolutely gorgeous day and a gorgeous new turf field.
Well, for sure. We'll get to that in a minute as well. I mean, I saw the pictures, and folks, go to Darren's Twitter feed. I mean, you see the just how great the stadium looks. And I did see between an interaction with yourself, a fan, and Rianne Marcoux, they're going to revamp the Ring of Honor as well in time for the first preseason game. So nice to see the newly named Princess Auto Stadium is going to be looking as good as ever once we get out to the park for Blue Bomber game action this year. Milt Stegall is the headliner today. Tell us about your interactions with Milt, how he looked, but also, like, what is behind this? Why is he at 54 years old out at rookie camp with the Bombers?
Yeah, it's been 16 years since he retired in 2008, right? And breaking all those records in 2007, putting him into the CFL history books as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, receiver to ever play in this league. I honestly feel like Milt will say a whole bunch of reasons why he's here. But to me, this is a guy that is just, I don't care how old he is. He's 54. Doesn't matter. He is absolutely full of life. You can hear it in his voice, like he's talking full throat volume after, a 3-hour practice on the field where he did not look out of place at all in a very, very good way. He blended in physically. He looks quick. He looks slim. Still, as he says, cute in the face, thin in the waist. No question. He's still got it. But I honestly feel like it's just Milt doing something that's been on his bucket list for a long time, showing all of those schlubs at TSN that he works with on the panel that, he could still strap them up and play with these guys because here he is doing it. One day for him, says I'm like, are you going to hit the cold tub to the neck? Now, after your first practice, he goes, I'm going to the top of the head. So he's going to ice it down, but he's going to be no worse for wear tomorrow.
Was it you or was it Hammer that tweeted at him and said, well, maybe you should get Davis Sanchez to come out and participate. You guys can go head to head. And of course, Milt said that would be no contest. The guy is a physical specimen and frankly a freak at his age. From the videos we saw, and I'm not surprised at all, like 85 did not look out of place. If you did not know what the situation was, I'm sure he would have blended right in.
He did. Here's the thing. I'm a details guy. I watch really closely, like the color of the cage to know when they're doing the throwback uniforms back in the day, what color gloves or shoes a guy is wearing. One thing we know at Blue Bombers camp, when there's over 100 guys here, right? They don't have enough numbers for everybody. So guys will wear the same number, like there'll be a 30 on offense and a 30 on defense. But nobody ever wears 3 numbers. And that is Chris Walby's number 63, the late, great Kenny Plain's number 11, and of course, Milt Stegall's number 85. So it was surreal to see an 85 out on the field. We have never seen an 85 in blue and gold on this field at the newly coined Princess Auto Stadiums. And to see the 150 fans that were most definitely here to see Milt cheer when he made reps. He's just doing like the ladder drill, like Remis just pulled up there on my Twitter feed, the video there, just doing his regular reps, and they're cheering for him like, great job, 85, yeah, go Milt. It was pretty cool to see, and no doubt fans had fun watching him.
Hey, Andrew Haleko asked in chat, was Willie J on the sidelines with an oxygen bottle and mask as he promised on Twitter?
He was on the sidelines. I didn't see the tank. Maybe it was under his sweater. I don't know. But Willie's here. He's champing at the bit as he always is. Guy doesn't miss practice. Clearly doesn't miss practice even when he's not allowed to participate. So, this Blue Bombers team, with the way last season ended, with the way the offseason went, with retaining so much of the talent, and knowing that the BC Lions are loading up as they host the Grey Cup this November, it's going to be a very hard-fought West Division. I think the guys are really, really amped to go and finish the job in 2024.
Just before we move on from Milt, I want to throw out the why not question of the day for not AutoCorp at Waverly and McGillivray. And of course, Milt, a not guy for a long time. You still see him featured in the ads because he is so recognizable here in Winnipeg. I do wonder, why not question today, how many of you think, like I do, that Milt actually could pull it off and play in a game still right now? Give us your thoughts on Milt in the chat right now for the why not question of the day. It is a lot more than Milt. He was getting all the attention for obvious reasons, Darrin, but rookie camp is very brief, and it is a quick chance for a lot of young players to show that they belong in training camp. Fill us in on the actual work that was done today, and what the young players trying to make a name for themselves and catch the eye of the coaches went through.
So to catch people up that are like, holy crap, it's football season. Here we are, day one of rookie camp. So it's today, tomorrow, and Friday, 3 days of rookie camp, where it is the veteran quarterbacks, Chris Streveler and Zach Collaros, of course, a couple young guys, as well as Winnipegger and University of Manitoba Bison's quarterback, Jackson Tuchinski, throwing the footballs. But outside of the quarterbacks, it's all rookies, global rookies, draft picks, and new Americans that have never played in the CFL before. So it's 3 days of who's got it, who doesn't, obviously who can stay healthy. As my pregame co-host on Bonfire Sports says, you can't make the club from the tub. You got to be healthy, or you're going to get, in Chris Walby's words, an apple and a roadmap, and you're going to hit the dirt. So, it's 3 days to kind of see if you can separate from the pack, if you can rise to the top. And Mike O'Shea has said every year since he took over head coaching duties of this team over a decade ago, it's the guys that are enthusiastic, able to practice every day, and that are stealing reps. They're jumping and cutting to the front of the line to get another rep in to show what they have. But 3 days of rookie camp. On Saturday, veterans report. There'll be medicals and physicals and all the rest to make sure the guys are good to go for day one of training camp on Sunday. So Saturday, the Blue Bombers need to reduce their roster to 85 plus non-counters. Non-counters are globals and Canadian rookies and draft picks. Those guys do not count against the roster, at least through training camp. So that's how it's going to work over the next few days. But really, Hustler, there's so many new guys out there. Sure, some catch your eye. They show flashes here and there, but so many new guys and a couple holes for Winnipeg to fill. It's hard to keep track of everybody.
Again, and a lot of guys, we don't even know who they are. They're coming here for the first time. You're working through multiple numbers. I mean, listen, it wouldn't be fair to say, who stood out? But I will ask you, is there an area of, like a position area where there seems to be, a lot of rookies and rookies that might have a better chance of actually competing in training camp once the big boys get here and the veterans are around on the weekend?
Yeah, I've identified 5 position groups where the Winnipeg Blue Bombers need to find either a starter or add a lot of good depth to. We'll start with returner because, of course, Janarian Grant, believe it or not, is a free agent on the street right now, able to sign with any CFL club he so chooses or NFL club. Mike O'Shea was asked about that today. He says, there's a lot of good players out there, and sometimes guys kind of just fall out of the league. But whether it was, the contract numbers not aligning for Janarian Grant and Winnipeg or other CFL teams, not too sure. Hey, when the Montreal Alouettes cut Chandler Worthy a week ago, anything is possible when it comes to a lot of the electric kick returners in the CFL. So Winnipeg is going to need to find somebody to return kicks. Nick Dembski is always there. They've got some other guys that can probably step in a pinch, but to find that guy that can make an impact, Aaron Cruikshank is one guy I think is probably atop the list, somebody that they want to get a good long look at kick returner. The other is right tackle and left guard. Of course, Jamarcus Hardrick signing the big contract with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Winnipeg needs to find somebody to play right tackle. And they have some guys with CFL experience, other guys with NFL experience, former draft picks in the NFL. Of course, you got to see how they adapt to, the yard off the ball and a lot of speed coming off of the edge. Left guard, Jeff Gray, another guy who is a free agent on the street, not re-signed by Winnipeg. They need to fill that left guard spot. So they got Tui Ellie, who was a reserve O-lineman over the last number of years, and Liam Dobson, who was the team's first-round draft pick a couple years ago. One of those two is going to be the starting left guard. The other will be that 6th offensive lineman on the game day roster. Defensive end, Jackson Jeffcoat, no longer in the Canadian Football League. He's decided to move on and retire from the game that I know he loves so much. Celestin Haba is the American who was a rookie last season, got into some games when Jeffcoat was hurt. And then, of course, there's Anthony Bennett, who was a high draft pick of the Blue Bombers last season, a Canadian who could probably rotate in there. But I think they want to find some depth. They want to find, a defensive end and a defensive tackle that can kind of help bolster that group. Some of those Canadian draft picks are going to factor into that, but they will always need more American depth, whether it's on the practice roster or if they start the year on the injured list. And then finally, defensive back. Okay, Demario Houston, who led the CFL in interceptions last season for the Blue Bombers, did not return to Winnipeg in free agency. So that boundary cornerback spot is wide open. You got Jamal Parker, you've got Dietrich Nichols and Evan Holm, the two CFL All-Stars who are kind of attached at the hip on that one side of the field. B.A. Brandon Alexander at safety, Reda Kramdi, who really took that dime back spot, that strong side linebacker spot as a Canadian into the latter parts of last season. All of those guys, I think, are pretty safe in their jobs, but they need to find that fifth defensive back, or six if you include the dime backer. So two on the O-line, defensive end, defensive tackle, two on the D-line, a receiver, returner, and a defensive back. Those are the spots I'm looking for.
Listen, a pretty awesome rundown of it all. I mean, I think back, and we were talking to Ed Tate yesterday or Monday on the show just about upcoming camp and kind of where those positional battles were, or the openings where, you know, guys that we are not really familiar with are coming into battle. And I think about, was it 2 or 3 years ago, where the DB situation was a massive question mark. And by the end of the season, you had D. Alford going to the National Football League and Dietrich Nichols proving that he's not only a starter in the league, but an all-star. And that, I think, is going to be a very similar spot, although maybe not so focused on one area. But, Darrin, as we know, when you have the level of success that the Bombers have had year over year over year under this O'Shea Walters regime, there are going to be guys that get raises elsewhere. And, I mean, I think they've done an incredible job of keeping. I mean, the fact that we're going to be talking about Dalton Schoen and Brady Oliveira both in the lineup this year is something that I think most of us thought was not possible. But when that happens, other holes open up in the lineup, and those are probably going to be the big stories of camp. The other story of camp, which we can get to right today, is the return of Chris Streveler, who was out there. I mean, I'm sure he was bringing his patented max energy to everything that was happening today, even working with the rookies.
No question. I will say this, though. The Chris Streveler we knew from 2019, and obviously last seen in Winnipeg, at least widespread seen in Winnipeg, with the fur coat, no shirt, and chugging the beers during the Grey Cup parade and celebrations. So it probably lasted for a week after that behind the scenes, if you know what I'm saying. This is a different Chris Streveler. This is a guy that's been in the NFL for 4 years. He is older. He is more mature. I would say that same exuberance for the game of football, that same energy and excitement that he has, like he's a kid in a candy store when he's on the field because, well, hey, we all know what he can do between the white lines under the lights on a Thursday or a Friday night. But I think he is a lot more mature. I think he's going to take on more of a leadership role as the number 2 quarterback slash player that he is. We remember Cordell Stewart of the Pittsburgh Steelers back in the day, right? Is he a fullback? Is he a tight end? Is he a running back? Is he, will he line up as a receiver? I wouldn't put it past Buck Pierce and this Blue Bombers offense. You can have 2 quarterbacks on the field at the same time. So a little Kolaris Streveler 1-2 punch. Creativity, I think, will be the name of the game in Buck Pierce's playbook as the offensive coordinator in 24.
DB, what do you have cooking at Bonfire now that it's back to the grind? Rookie camp, training camp. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of content for Bomber fans to get their daily fill.
Yeah, you're going to get so much on Bonfire Sports this year. I got a new guy. I'm looking at him right now. Vic is joining the team at Bonfire Sports. Yes, and he's awesome. So we've got some great things in store. First and foremost, Chris Walby is back. We are going to do Game Day Winnipeg, our pregame show, every single game, preseason, regular season, postseason, Grey Cup if they're there. We always do that. Zach Schnitzer will join me for Game Day After Dark, live post-game coverage after every Blue Bombers game. We got video highlights, get into the live chat. People are talking. It's our most popular show. Looking forward to that. But with Vic and myself, We're going to have tons of content up on the Bonfire WPG Twitter account and Instagram account. You can find everything on bonfiresports.ca. I always appreciate you letting me plug things, Hustler. But the Milt Stegall press conference or scrum that he had today following practice, it was lengthy. It was really good. It's going to be up on Bonfire Sports YouTube channel very, very soon. But hey, get on there and follow us on all the socials. Bonfiresports.ca is where you'll find links to everything.
I'll be watching that Milt presser as soon as we're done WST, as soon as it's off. And you mentioned Schnitzy. I can't imagine how fired up Zach is. I mean, this is probably like Christmas morning. Finally, we've got Blue Bomber football to talk about. And listen, he's not alone. As disappointing as last week went for the Jets and the early exit from the playoffs, you get some nice weather, you get the fellas back in town, and you can feel a real excitement for the Blue Bombers, as well as the Downs opening in 2 weeks, the Goldeyes starting their season this week. It's all coming together. Home opener sold out already. By the way, just quickly, I know we're talking Bombers here right now, but we're going to get to hear a little bit more of the energy of DB at Seabears games. Congratulations, back doing the PA and pretty much there for all the games this year.
Yeah, I did half the games last year as the PA announcer right on the court. The energy in there is unbelievable. It's literally tangible. You can feel it in your chest. Love the role that I have with the Seabears. So many talented people there. Tons of awesome stuff in store for this season. Yeah, no surprise that home opener sold out. There'll be 10,580 people rocking that place. If you haven't been to a Seabears game, go. You won't regret it. Your kids will love it. Your partner will love it. Head down there. Classified. No surprise they sold out game one. Classified doing a pregame and a halftime show for the 10,000 plus fans. It's the spot to be. So go check out your Seabears basketball. I think you're gonna like it a lot.
Yeah, we've got lots to occupy us now that the Jets and Moose season are done here for hockey moving forward. And again, get your tickets for the Seabears because already gonzo for game number 1, and they will be going for the rest of the season. Had a great night out talking Seabears with Jason Smith, and apparently another big signing coming tomorrow by a big-time former NBAer. We'll fill you in on that tomorrow when it all becomes official. Darrin, shout out to you. Great to see Vic there with you, helping you crank out the content. We will talk to you throughout the season. All the best, my friend, and thanks for doing this.
Weather like this, Hustler, I got one word for you. Cheers. See you on the patio.
You got it. We got an LBJ for you. Of course, you can pick up Little Brown Jug at Princess Auto Stadium as well. Yeah, today sounds like a great day to get out of the golf course. I know my pals of the one of the men's leagues at Breezy are going to be ripping it up tonight. And man, with this weather the next few days, I mean, if you can get out, make it happen. Of course, Breezy Bend, great partners of ours since day one of Manitoba's top private courses. If you're interested in finding out more on making Breezy a long-term golfing home for you and your family, go to breezybend.ca. Or give our friend pal Corey Johnson a call, the GM of the year, and find out more about options moving forward into next season, as well as one of the nicest and best places hosting weddings and other events as well at Breezy Bend, and all the information is there at breezybend.ca. By the way, Wells Fargo kicks off tomorrow. We are going to, we did get all over it today with Pat Gregoire, who dropped the Taylor Pendrith 80-1 bomb on us last week. So if you want a little bit more on the golf tournament this week, as well as the Stanley Cup playoffs, check out today's Lock Shop over at the Edmonton Sports Talk channel. Speaking of Coolbet, I'll actually be basically holding it down on the Lock Shop for the next little bit. Dusty's going to be off with Kevin Sawyer calling the WHL Championship, which gets underway on Friday. So you can join myself, Pat, Jake, and other guests over the next little bit. Noon daily before WST over at Edmonton Sports Talk. Tonight in the playoffs over at Coolbet. Let's check out the lines. The Panthers down 1-0. Minus 163 favorites to even their series. The Boston Bruins plus 138. I like Florida tonight to get this one done. And then we finally get puck drop in the Oilers and Canucks series. Oilers minus 128, Canucks plus 109, home dog. And if you do want to get in a little bit more into this series, the Canucks plus 210, that's actually down from plus 220. Oilers minus 263. I think this is going to be a longer series. I know a lot of people think the Oilers are going to wipe the floor with the Canucks. I don't. I think this series certainly goes 6, potentially 7. So I do like the over 5.5 games at minus 167. Probably put a little sprinkle on a game 7 at plus 230. But they've also got all sorts of props for the series. Zach Hyman total goals over 3.5. McDavid total goals over 3.5. JT Miller over 2.5. I do like that one. I think he's sort of the top guy. We'll see what happens with Elias. He's been struggling a little bit. But all sorts of series props available up until puck drop tonight over at Coolbet.com. NBA playoffs. It's the Knicks and Pacers going at it tonight. What a week at MSG, like we talked about a little earlier on. Rangers last night, right back to the Knicks. Knicks minus 189 faves and 5-point favorites. That's tonight. And then tomorrow, we get back going with Cleveland and Boston and Dallas and OKC. And again, with the golf tournament beginning tomorrow, as we just talked about in the Breezy Bend Golf Report, all the odds are up right now for the Wells Fargo Championship. No Scotty Scheffler. He's having a baby. Rory McIlroy, the favorite, of plus 775. Xander Schauffele, 10-1. Wyndham Clark, 16-1. We've got some other picks, but we do like Max Homa, former winner at this course, 25-1. Great value on Max. And you can check out the exclusives as well, because we do have a parlay from the lock shop. Max Homa, Matty Fitzpatrick, and Tommy Fleetwood, all to top 20. Plus 675 there. Get on it if you want to ride with us. And hey, if you haven't played a Coolbet before, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. Remo, what's your take on this Edmonton-Vancouver series that gets going tonight?
Going to be closer than people think, as everyone's writing off Vancouver. For them, I think it's going to be about goaltending for sure. And they need where's Paterson been? He hasn't really showed up. And Lindholm, I mean, that trade not looking great for them. But I think they do have Besser and JT Miller put up big points this year. So they got to shut down the special teams. That's what it's going to be about. And can Stuart Skinner replicate his performance in round 1? Goaltending, special teams, very key in the playoffs. You don't even need to tell you that. So I just think everyone's writing off Vancouver, so they get first crack at home. We'll see how they do.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one tonight. That is a 9 o'clock puck drop tonight? Yeah, 9 p.m. for us here, and 6:30 for Bruins and Panthers for game number 1 of the evening. You can check out Coolbet Canada at Coolbet Canada on X, as well as Instagram. We'll crank out our daily pick a little bit later on. Well, a fun show today, Reem. And again, you know, the week of the beginning of the head coaching search continues, as we'll have Ken jump on tomorrow with us. Looking forward to seeing what Kenny has to say about Bonus's retirement, as well as his thoughts on some potential head coaches, in addition to Scott Arniel, who certainly is right in the mix for the job.
Yeah, head coach watch. We need something to draw people, and that's what we're going with, head coach watch. So today's day 2. You know, great conversation with Murat. Love that. See what Ken has to say tomorrow. But, you know, it's not just head coach watch. There's, you know, as we said, Bombers and Sea Bears. But for the Jets, I mean, interesting takes there from Murat on Ehlers. What are they going to do with this defense? There's probably going to be changes with DeMello and Dillon being UFAs. You got to make room. You talk with Chris Peters. Great info on Sal Monson. And, I mean, does Ville Heinola, does he crack the roster? We'll wait and see what happens. But I do think this Jets team will look slightly different, even though a lot of guys right now under contract for next season. There are a few key pieces who are, you know, UFAs and Cole Perfetti and RFAs. Well, what does his contract come in? Are we going to be waiting, I don't know, till like right before training camp for that one to be done, Huss? I guess no, he doesn't have arbitration.
Good question on that one. No, he doesn't. He's just coming out of the ELC.
Yeah, so it could be a while.
Well, and the interesting thing is whether the Jets are going to push for a longer-term deal or whether Cole Perfetti is going to look for a 1 or 2 year bridge deal and try and, play a larger role in the team moving forward, which I think is almost a given, considering the way the season ended for him this year. And then sign a deal where making a little bit more for a longer term. All of these Jets topics we'll stay on top of throughout the summer and next few weeks. Ken joins us tomorrow. We'll have Billick and Rewicki as well with their thoughts before the end of the week. In the meantime, though, get outside. It is absolutely gorgeous. Great day to maybe go for a walk or do something in the park and listen to Winnipeg Sports Talk out there. But thanks to everyone that joined us today on YouTube. Thank you to the entire gang listening on podcasts. And, of course, a huge thanks to the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. That is going to do it for us. We will be back tomorrow live at 1 p.m. Ken Wiebe on the Jets and much more. John Mattis on the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll look forward to seeing you then, 1 p.m. WST live on YouTube and later on in the afternoon in your podcast feed. Have a great one, everyone.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.